Space travel is hard and unforgiving. It's always been and always will be.
It's going to be hard. There's a new chance of death. Going in a little can through deep space, it's a very harsh environment.
We think you can come back, but nothing is certain.
There are all sorts of challenges we will face on deep space missions. Communication delays, radiation protection, isolation of the crew.
So it is not surprising that some would have us stay where we are.
There's never going to be zero risk. When you're breaking the bonds of gravity, that's just part of the deal.
And it is one of the great adventures of all time.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro, go. Fido, go. Guide, go.
That challenge is one that we're willing to accept.
Surgeon, go.
Man in his quest for knowledge cannot be deterred.
Space is not just a destination. It changes you forever.
It'll be tough, really tough, but we have the right people for the job.
We have pressed the qualities for success into system after system.
This country of the United States was not built by those who waited and rested.
Pushed our people past every failure we can dream up.
We have never been more ready to meet the unknown.
Through Artemis, we will once again explore beyond our world.
And we will succeed.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is meteorologist Brad Panovich here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're getting excited today, as you just saw the opening there, for the next step in the Artemis mission. Now, remember last year, after numerous delays and a lot of pain, we had to roll back Artemis I several times and push it all the way back to late last year. They finally were able to launch Artemis I, which was an uncrewed mission to test everything for our return back to the moon. In 50 years it's been since the last Apollo mission. Today's important because the announcement of the 4 members that will be the crewed mission, which will launch sometime next year, Artemis II. Now, the selection is going to take place in Houston coming up at 11 a.m., so we're going to kind of get you ready for that. There will be 3 Americans and 1 Canadian, and these astronauts probably are pretty nervous right now. They're excited. We don't know if they know who is going to be selected. I'm getting excited. I can't imagine being in their shoes because they've trained and worked for this their whole lives, and they're going to be the first mission since 1972 to orbit the moon. Now, Artemis II is set to go off late next year. We were hoping when Artemis was first announced a while ago that next year would be the actual mission to land on the moon. That is not the case. Artemis II will be kind of a similar test mission, but it'll have people on board. So this will be a test with a crewed mission. They will not physically land on the moon. They will orbit the moon. It'll be a 10-day mission, and this will allow them to look at the moon, kind of survey where the future landing spots will be. And the key part about this is, unlike the Apollo missions, for those that remember, in the late 60s, early 70s, where they landed in the equatorial areas of the moon, they're going to be looking in the southern part of the moon, which is an area that is sometimes obscured from the sun. There are craters there that we think there is frozen water. And so the goal is to find a landing spot more in the southern part of the moon, because we want to harvest that water for future missions and a moon base that will be there. So this is a little bit different than Apollo. So this mission, while it's also a test with a crewed capsule, it's also going to be a chance for them to orbit the moon and look real detailed, focused look at where they could land and where there's possibly a crater right on the edge of where the sun and the shadows are. Because remember, there's only one side of the moon that's in direct sunlight all the time. The dark side it never is, but there's some areas on the edge where there's craters because they're so deep, there's no sunlight down there, so that frozen water is likely there. So it's an exciting mission. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it. And today we're going to find out the 4 astronauts that are going to go on this mission. Now, to kind of place where we are now, we have to look back at Artemis I. It was a successful, albeit very late mission last year after numerous delays, surviving a hurricane, being rolled back, and that was good reason those delays occurred. Remember, it's all about safety and making sure everything works and testing every part of that before we actually put people on. So let's look back at Artemis I, which was launched last year successfully. It returned to Earth as we get ready for the crew announcement today.
50 years after we last left footprints on the moon, NASA's Artemis I is our first bold step towards getting us back there and pushing us farther than we've ever been before. You are looking at the world's most powerful rocket and Orion spacecraft live on Launch Pad 39B. The energy here is palpable as we attempt to make history today.
We're going to learn so much about the solar system from the moon and even about the Earth.
Range weather. Weather is go for launch.
The mission management team has been pulled. You have a go to proceed with terminal count.
On behalf of all the men and women across our great nation who have worked to bring this hardware together to make this day possible, at this time I give you a go to resume count and launch Artemis I.
4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis I. We rise together. Back to the moon and beyond.
SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour.
The harder the climb, the better the view. We showed the Space Coast tonight. What a beautiful view it is. The first step in returning our country to the moon and on to Mars.
The Orion spacecraft is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit, now less than 2 hours away from splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. This view on the deck of the USS Portland. Flight Dynamics reports that Orion is right on the money, coming right down the pike, and there it is, high over the Pacific, America's new ticket to ride to the moon and beyond now in view. We have 3 fully inflated main chutes. Splashdown. From Tranquility Base to Taurus Littrow to the tranquil waters of the Pacific, the latest chapter of NASA's journey to the moon comes to a close. Orion, back on Earth.
And next year, those will be the same scenes we'll see, but instead of being an uncrewed capsule, there will be 4 astronauts on that capsule as it splashes down in the Pacific. And today, we're going to find out who those 4 astronauts are. Now, there's a list of astronauts. We've got a list of them, and there's kind of all these rumors about who's going to be on there. We do have somebody local that I think is going to be a favorite for a lot of people in the Carolinas. Christina Cook, she is from, actually grew up in Grand Rapids, but she grew up, I should say, she was born in Grand Rapids, grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina, in the eastern part of the state, and she's an NC State undergrad and graduate grad. So she is kind of, I would say, the local favorite. There she is. She's native to the Carolinas, and she's actually one of the favorites. It's kind of interesting when you see, I wouldn't say there's like betting or gambling going on, but there's kind of these rumors I said earlier about who these 5 or 6 maybe finalists are, and we don't know if they know. I'm wondering today, I'm going to be watching this carefully to see the looks on their face, because I think that's going to tell you whether or not they knew ahead of time. They probably got a general idea of the favorites in in this group, but I don't think the Final Four is really known completely. So that's what we're going to find out today, coming up at 11 a.m. And we will join the NASA stream when they start that. It should be pretty spectacular. We don't know how the announcement's going to go. Are they going to do one at a time, do all 4 of them, and then talk about each one, whether or not they'll take questions? It should be pretty fascinating to watch. But the rocket itself is pretty interesting. We've seen this massive rocket, bigger than the Saturn series, much more technology than we had in the Apollo missions. And to me, that's the exciting thing about this mission, is that you have so much better technology. And think about that, we went to the moon 50 years ago with the technology we had in the late 60s and 70s, and here we are in 2023, and the technology has changed so much from a space flight standpoint, but also from a communication standpoint, which for the folks at home who are watching this stream right now, whether they're on a phone or other device, this is going to make this mission so much more front-facing, because in the late 60s, early 70s, people were sitting down in front of their broadcast TV to see the highlights or see the live feed from the Apollo mission. You're going to be able to see so much more of this in real time on devices because we're so much more connected. But that rocket is pretty amazing because it's got all these different parts that were built by different agencies and different companies. This is really international cooperation to put this rocket together. It is just massive. Look at all these parts. And I don't think these pictures and videos really put in perspective. Our producer, James Brierton, was down there last month. Was it last month, James? Yeah, it seems like it was forever ago. But yeah, it was only last month, and he was able to head down there and show us some of this stuff up close and personal. And I think James does a great job showing you what this stuff looks like. So first off, let's look at the Artemis booster, which is, and if you've never been to Kennedy Space Center, the vehicle assembly building is just massive. You realize that the shuttle was in there at one point, which was a massive rocket, but this actually fits in there as well. And James gives us a little behind the scenes tour of the facility.
So how tall is the vehicle assembly building? About 530 feet tall. Wow.
The Artemis program. I hope you have all heard about Artemis already, but this is NASA's plan to send humans back to the moon. So this is the building where we stacked the Artemis I moon rocket and where we'll stack the coming Artemis missions. But this is also the building where all the Saturn V's for the Apollo program and all 135 space shuttles were stacked in here. So some people refer to this building as the Space Cathedral because there's a lot of history in here. As we're making our way down the building, I'll try to point out some of the original components that were used for Apollo. This is kind of their testing and checkout cells, right? So before you stack all the pieces on top of each other, you want to make sure that they're all going to fit together and they're all ready for launch. You can kind of think of the rockets we bring in here as a kind of highly explosive set of Lego, right? We're kind of, all roads lead to Kennedy Space Center, and here at the Vehicle Assembly Building, we get all the pieces and parts of the rockets.
During the Artemis I launch,
yes.
They rolled back
yes.
for hurricanes.
Uh-huh.
What are hurricanes like inside this building?
Yes, so this is Florida, so it's an occurrence that, we're prepared for. So essentially, all the doors, they're mostly closed right now, but they kind of, close up the building nice and snug. And yeah, this building is prepared to take on hurricanes. So
if you want to survive an hurricane,
yes, and the building next door, the Launch Control Center, that's the place you want to be. So when we have hurricanes here, there's a whole team that rides them out. And so they get to sleep and have a sleepover in the Launch Control Center, making sure that the center is all safe and sound. But what happens is the crawler transporter rolls under here at its top speed of about 1 mile per hour. The platform, you can kind of see it sitting on yellow jacks right now. So the crawler comes up under there, raises up, that gray platform sits on it, and then rolls to the launch pad. So here's 2 of our high bays. This one right across from us was used for space shuttle. So you can see the orange platforms in there and the gray. We can't see it, but in this gray box over here, that's where the access point into the shuttle was. So if they needed to, put payloads in there or put people in there to get everything configured for the astronauts, that was kind of their access point for shuttle. And you can kind of see the big doors a little better. On the bottom level, it's kind of like big barn doors that open up horizontally. And then this way, they open up vertically. It takes about 45 minutes to get the doors all the way opened up. But you can kind of see where the space shuttle maxed out on this side, so they didn't need to open all those vertical doors to get the shuttle out. But for Artemis and Apollo, they do have to open those doors all the way up because they're so much taller than the space shuttle was.
The vehicle assembly building is not the place to work if you don't like heights. It is the tallest single-story building by volume. And it just seems to go forever.
Right here, actually hooked up to the crane right now. The boosters are 5 segments tall. For Space Shuttle, they were 4 of these segments. So this is the bottom segment. And actually, the entire weight of the rocket is stacked on these solid rocket boosters. So they're the first part of the rocket that gets stacked before they put the big orange core stage in between them. And you can kind of see in there some of the platforms are extended in the high bay. So those platforms go in and out. Imagine giant hydraulic kitchen drawers. That's essentially what those platforms are. And those are the access points for the workers to get to the rocket. And they come to us via rail from Utah. Then they wheel them over here into this. The crane team gets all ready to go, and then up right where we were standing and over and down into High Bay 3. Yeah, so full scale of 1/5 of one of the boosters. And so you got 2 of those, plus the core stage, plus the upper stage. So it's hard to visualize it, but it's a pretty big rocket.
I tell you what, with spring break coming up, if anybody's heading to Florida, that is a must-see tourist attraction. Go to Kennedy Space Center. You have no idea how amazing the tour is, and just being on that property is just, it really, when I went down there several years ago, went there with my family, went there a couple years before that for GOES 16, it really was. Just gives you tingles knowing all the history that happened there. And speaking of that, James was also able to talk to the Kennedy Space Center director, Janet Petro, about what some of the things that she has to do down there. Let's talk to her.
You're the first woman to hold this position, and we're getting ready to send the first woman to the moon.
Absolutely.
What does all of that mean to you?
We had our first Artemis I mission, as you said, at the end, capstone of our 60th anniversary. It was a big anniversary present for us. But yeah, first woman and first person of color on the surface of the moon, lunar. I have my personal favorite that I picked out in the astronaut that I want to go, but who knows? I'll be making an announcement for the crewed flight of Artemis II sometime this year, soon, sometime this year. But then, of course, Artemis III is when the crew will actually be descending down to the surface of the moon. So that'll be the really exciting. Right, and then, of course, Artemis III will be bringing up our astronauts in Orion, matching up and bringing them down. 2025 is when we're shooting for. But there is some complexities and some dependencies there. So we'll see.
All right, we're 10 minutes away now. Top of the hour, we should find out who those 4 crew members are going to be. And when James was down there, I think he was doing his best investigative reporting technique here to try to figure out if one of the astronauts that was on site was one of the ones picked. And he actually asked astronaut Rajachari about the suspense and kind of waiting to figure out if he's going to be one of the crew members for Artemis II.
My question is for Raj. You're a trained professional, but as a human being, I wonder what it's like dealing with the suspense, waiting to find out who's going to fly Artemis 2, 3, and beyond.
It's actually pretty easy. I'd be happy with anyone in the office to do it. I mean, I think the whole reason I applied again twice, so I applied once and didn't make it in. The reason I applied again is everyone in the office is awesome. So I don't think it matters who it is. We'll all be excited and all fall in line to support that person and those people. I think, we were actually talking. I was talking with some of the PA folks. I think the most common misconception about astronauts is that our job is to fly in space. Well, that is a job, but most of our job is not flying in space. You mentioned 28 years, which is the same number Tom Marshburn, who was my pilot on Crew 3, was in the office. And so out of 28 years in the office, he flew like 500 some days. But that's when you look at the percentages, that's a small amount. But it's flying in space is awesome, don't get me wrong. But we love our day job. So whether it was helping with the commercial crew and working with Dana before I flew, or helping with HLS and the lunar lander now, that is super exciting stuff. And so, yeah, I would love to get assigned to Artemis. Everyone would, but we also love our job.
All right, the question is, will it be him, or who is it going to be? So I want to bring in from our sister station in Cleveland, and my good friend, Betsy Kling, my fellow weather geek. And Betsy, this go around, we know something's going to happen today. There's not going to be a delay. We're going to find out the 4 members of this crew, and it's pretty exciting. It's exciting for me. I can't imagine being in their shoes right now.
I mean, it's amazing. When I was down there for launch, the Artemis astronauts, that whole team was prominently paraded through the media center and other areas of NASA, of course, to meet with the public and also meet members of the media. And it's so interesting when you see them because they all show up in their blue suits, right? That's number one. They have their NASA suits. And those flight suits are kind of iconic for our NASA astronauts. But more importantly, you got to see their faces, and they are getting some very incredible media training in order to understand the pressures that are going to be involved. Now, you have to remember, these are people who have been training for years. In some cases, they've already been astronauts for more than a decade. And so, in 2 decades, even in some cases. So with this next generation of human spaceflight, they will be history makers. These 2 people are the group that will be going, whoever goes, beyond the moon farther than any human has ever flown before. That's a pretty incredible, line to have on your resume, whether you're an astronaut or whatever. I flew the farthest first. But the other part of it is they're flying brand new hardware and software. Yeah. It's not been tested with humans in it. And they got great readings, of course, on this Artemis I flight that was a resounding success. Obviously, that gives them a little bit of, a sigh of relief, like, okay, there weren't too many issues here or there. But, you want to put somebody in those seats and give that opportunity to people who are going to bring back the best results. You're going to put somebody who has some experience in that position, I'm sure, especially the commander's seat. So, everybody kind of has their favorites, but we'll find out pretty soon who it's going to be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, we had Artemis I, which was completely, all automated, right? There's nobody on board doing anything. So in some sense, you think, okay, well, this is going to be like an autopilot mission. But unlike Artemis I, there's life support issues now. You've got all these things that with humans on board, from oxygen to waste disposal to food, and then troubleshooting, having somebody on board. It'll be really interesting to see how much of the automation versus manned, control there's going to be on this. I think that's going to be the fascinating thing for me, to see, how much control these guys actually, or gals, they will have, because we're going to have the first female on there as well.
Yeah, and I think the cool part of it is, that Orion capsule specifically has now been tested. For those who, may have kind of fallen off of the wayside of what's been happening, you need a little bit of a refresher course. The fabulous James has queued up a really slick little introduction to the Orion capsule, just in case you need reminding.
It is not your grandfather's Apollo. It is a marvelous machine.
Orion may look old school.
Just the capsule alone has, tens of thousands of pieces that come from suppliers all across the nation.
But it's packed with all new tech and the capability to take humans deeper into space than ever before.
Physics hasn't changed in 50 years. Almost everything else on Orion has changed.
A life-supporting capsule that is the most advanced technology to leave Earth.
The number one thing is computers, is the whole avionics system. All of that is outfitted, completely different from what we used before.
Once we get the displays and controls for the astronauts in there, it's not going to be the old switches that we had in the space shuttle. It's going to be, touch screens. It's going to be a lot of more digital technologies.
We've got 2 million lines of software code in this vehicle.
There's in the neighborhood of 1,000 different sensors on it.
Tested hundreds, even thousands of times.
Every new spacecraft development runs into challenges. Things we find in the testing that didn't quite work right, and so we go figure out what went wrong, we fix it, and then go and fly.
And it's changing the way we fly.
The machine is very marvelous that the crew don't have to be pilots anymore. They can be scientists and medical doctors and such to be able to do exploration.
It truly is an incredible piece of machinery. The flight, Artemis I flight, the critical test, they had 4 test objectives. The number 1 test objective was the heat shield, that 1.6-inch membrane that it ablates. It basically, as it gets hot, pieces of it start to move away from the rocket, and that helps to distribute the capsule. It helps to distribute the heat away from the capsule. So those 5,000 degree reentry conditions can be, support it, at least the capsule can support the people inside it. They're protected from those really nasty conditions as it's coming back at 25,000 miles per hour. The other part of it, Brad, is, as you may remember, is that, the Artemis I mission was testing the hardware and the software, and you mentioned the, life support and oxygen systems and waste and whatever. But remember, they're going farther and deeper into space than the low Earth orbit that we typically deal with right now. And so they have to go through the Van Allen belts, these really high intensity belts of radiation. And that was a huge part of this too. And they were actually inside the Orion 1 capsule. There were what are called phantoms, as well as a moonikin, like a mannequin dressed as an astronaut. That would be Moonikin Campos, who was the commander of Artemis 1. And then his companions were basically just torsos, heads and torsos that were radiation testing equipment, and that's Helga and Zohar. And one of them had this real fancy radiation protecting vest. The other one did not. And so those scientists who were in charge of that part of the project are still going over data to see what worked, what didn't work. And of course, radiation is absolutely awful on the human body. And when you get outside of the Earth's protective atmosphere, you are subjected to some pretty intense radiation, gamma ray even. And then when you go through those belts around the Earth, that's where it's like really, really bad. So it'll be interesting to see how all that fares.
Yeah, I was looking at the shielding they have. You mentioned they have, they were testing the mannequins or the, the suits. They also have like 2 layers of protection on the capsule with Kevlar. And the interesting thing, in the 2 layers, they're very thin. They protect from radiation. The Kevlar, though, you know why there's Kevlar? Is for like small meteorites or any other kind of space debris impacts it to protect it as well. So there's a lot of, there's a bazillion things that could go wrong with this mission. But you bring up a good point here. We have not sent anybody into those Van Allen belts since the Apollo mission. So, we don't know what this is going to react like. 10 hours, I think, is like the maximum that they're allowed to be exposed to that. The goal is to try to do it in 2 hours. And so that engine burn is key as well. So there's so much danger involved in this. And so from an excitement standpoint, I think there's still a little bit, you gotta have a little of fear, right? You're not an astronaut unless you know that something could go wrong. And I think that's where humans can be a huge asset to the mission, because they can problem solve on this mission and hopefully solve any issues. I don't know, I'm getting giddy thinking about this, because we're about a minute away, and I'm really curious, Betsy, what the faces of the astronauts will look like when they make this announcement.
Well, they're very friendly people, and they're also very smart people.
You brought the point about media training. I think that's going to be important, because for the next year, we're going to just constantly be seeing these people, and so that media training is going to come in handy.
Yeah, and they've been training. I mean, they're getting into those capsules, the test capsules in Houston, and they are intensively training for this, and they're going to continue to do that. But it's going to be a matter of the team component. Each of those 4 individuals will have a certain role when the mission takes place, and so who becomes that person that is, they're not siloed in their training. They're all training the same way, but then they'll start to break it into more of those specific job roles. I have to say Victor Glover is probably my top pick for commander.
That's what I was going to ask.
Just and he's been somebody who NASA has very prominently featured. And I guess we're going to find out real quick.
Yeah, we're hoping for Christina Cook, because she's local to the Carolinas. So we're going to find out. We're going to pick up NASA as they make this announcement for Artemis II.
Go. PD8, go. Fido, go. All right, go for launch.
Our destiny is always to go and see what's further and what's next.
Fido, I'm rolling the flight. Copy.
That was awesome. Good morning, and welcome to Ellington Field at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. I'm Joe Acaba. Thank you. I'm Joe Acaba, Chief of NASA's Astronaut Office, and I'm joined by Norm Knight, Director of NASA's Flight Operations Directorate. We're here today with a mission to introduce the world to the crew of Artemis II. 4 names, 4 explorers, 4 of my friends answering the call to once more rocket away from Earth and chart a course around the moon.
Well, Joe, I agree with you, Joe, but we're going to need a few more astronauts, I think, to get this started. So, everyone, please help me welcome our astronaut corps.
Yeah.
Look at that sea of blue. Let's give them another round of applause.
Yeah.
Our mission calls for 4 names. It's difficult to pick just 4 from a group that by its very definition attracts the best and the brightest that humanity has to offer. The astronaut corps, our entire astronaut corps, will be the forerunners as humanity looks to find its place among the stars. So that while we may be recognizing 4 individuals today, I want to thank the entire astronaut corps for their dedication and sacrifice as we ask them to strap into our current and future spacecraft, take those next steps to do the things that are hard so that others might follow behind them.
Now, some of you might be scanning the astronaut faces, trying to see who is missing and still hidden backstage. Well, know this, your Artemis II crew members are already here in the room with you. But because I love you all, I'm going to give you one hint. I am not one of them. Don't be so happy about that.
With Artemis I, we set out to prove that the hardware was ready, that SLS was prepared to launch our astronauts skyward, that Orion was equipped to carry them to the moon and back safely again. Artemis I was a resounding success, and Artemis II will leverage that by putting humans in the loop, executing operations in the critical path, leading to new footprints on the lunar surface.
This flight will be challenging, but we face that challenge with the confidence that the people working beside us are up to the task. Houston is home for us, and it's where we'll plan, train, and ultimately fly the Artemis II mission. To give us a proper Houston welcome, please join me in bringing out JSC Center Director Vanessa White.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone here today to Ellington Field. NASA's Johnson Space Center is home of America's Astronaut Corps, mission operations, and foundational human spaceflight programs. This past December, we witnessed history as the Orion capsule journeyed on a 1.4 million-mile journey around the moon and back. And the excitement continues as we prepare for Artemis II for the first time with crew. We've made many giant leaps in the past 60 years, fulfilling President Kennedy's goal of landing a person on the moon. And today, we stand on the shoulders of giants as we reach farther into the stars and push forward to the moon once again and on to Mars. These individuals of Artemis II crew will be the first humans to fly to the vicinity of the moon in more than 50 years. Yes. I'd like to take a moment to recognize those who paved the way, our Apollo legends, who are with us via the NASA Alumni League. Will you please wave? We are also honored to be joined by some special guests. Please help me welcome NASA leadership, Administrator Bill Nelson, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, Associate Administrator Bob Cabana, and many of our NASA leaders who are from headquarters and all across our agency. We're also pleased to be joined by the international community. Representing the Canadian Space Agency is Minister Champagne. Through our international partnerships under Artemis, we're building a global alliance that explores deep space for the benefit of all. I'd also like to welcome the following elected officials: Senator Ted Cruz, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, Congressman Brian Babin, Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, the Comptroller of Texas, Glenn Hager, the Mayor Pro Tem of Houston, Dave Martin, and many other elected officials. Thank you. We're very appreciative of your continued support. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to give a shout out to the NASA workforce and all of those across the agency who came together to make this a very exciting moment and this moment in history happen. So thank you to our workforce. Joining us today are directors of our NASA centers. Will you please stand? So my colleagues. This mission represents the culmination of years of hard work and dedication by NASA and its partners. This is an exciting time for those working on the International Space Station, commercial crew, commercial LEO destinations, as we continue using those platforms and conduct deep space exploration with the Orion, Gateway, Human Landing System, and EVA programs. Together, our team of civil servants and contractors are enabling the success of the Artemis program. And this is only the beginning. For the students with us today from Houston and Clear Creek Independent School Districts and those watching, you are the future explorers, the future scientists, engineers, inventors, and mathematicians of the Artemis generation. Under Artemis, we will explore the frontiers of space and push the boundaries of what's possible. You may walk on the moon or be one of the many explorers who venture onward to Mars. We're all looking forward to you being a part of our mission, and I can't wait for you and everyone to meet our Artemis II crew. Thank you.
The Artemis program is guided by decades of experience from sending humans to outer space. We're building new rockets, new spacecraft, new communication systems, and new ways to operate in deep space. But it isn't the technology that is changing. We've also learned that in order to go farther, we have to go together. Please join me in welcoming Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne. He's with us here from Canada, one of our steadfast partners in human spaceflight, ready to send one of their own to the moon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Joe, and good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. C'est un grand privilège d'être ici pour représenter le Canada. What an honor to be here today to represent Canada on this historic day. In his recent visit to Ottawa, President Biden said this: Canada and the U.S. can do big things because we do them together. And indeed, indeed, 50 years after the end of the Apollo missions, we are going back to the moon. Back to the moon. Think about that for a moment. The moon. As minister responsible for the Canadian Space Agency, I know Canadians could not be more proud. Proud to have for the first time a Canadian astronaut who will travel to deep space as part of the Artemis II mission. Proud that we will be contributing to the future of the Lunar Gateway with the unique Canadian innovation, Canadarm3. Proud that Canada will design, build, and operate a lunar utility vehicle to support operations on the lunar space. And proud of the 60-year plus of collaboration between NASA and the Canadian Space Agency, a partnership which is fueled by bold initiatives and scientific excellence. And most importantly, Canadians could not be more proud to share this moment with our American partners and friends which are here today in Houston. We would not be here today without the friendship and close partnership between our two nations. Because this is more than just about going back to the moon. This is about investing in the future. This is about possibilities. This is about seizing the opportunities of the space economy, from health to food security to climate change and much more. So as we embark together on this new space era, let's seize the moment. Let's be ambitious, and together let's inspire the young people watching us to reach for the stars and become the next generation of scientists, engineers, and explorers. Merci tout le monde. Thank you, everyone.
He pumped me up. That was nice. Next up is a group of people who need little introduction. Our agency leaders who know firsthand what it takes to fly in space. Please join me in welcoming NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, Deputy Administrator Pam Melroy, and Associate Administrator Bob Cabana.
Hey, everybody. Members of the NASA family and the Canadian Space Agency, my colleagues, my former colleagues, members of Congress, members of the Artemis generation, we are going. Pam, Bob, and I operate as a team, as a crew. And we are here today to introduce you to the crew that will launch next year, 2024, to another celestial body. The largest, most powerful rocket in the world is going to propel them onward and upward into the heavens. And they fly to the moon. This is Artemis II mission. It's a mission that is significant in many ways. It's a demonstration of our ability to push the boundaries of human achievement. It's a testament to the unwavering passion of the team that will make it possible. And it's a message to the world. We choose to go back to the moon and then on to Mars, and we're going to do it together. Because in the 21st century, NASA explores the cosmos with international partners. We will unlock new knowledge and understanding. We've always dreamed about what more is ahead. Why? Because it's in our DNA. It's part of us. It's who we are as adventurers, as explorers, as frontiers people. And throughout history, humankind has gazed up at this celestial body, the moon, with wonder. And the space program propelled the moon to the forefront of culture and consciousness. It galvanized a historic effort that we are now the stewards of. The moon is a symbol of our can-do spirit. And over the course of the Artemis missions, the first woman and the first person of color will take giant leaps on the lunar surface. It's been more than a half-century since astronauts journeyed to the moon. Well, folks, that's about to change. The mission to the moon will launch 4 pioneers, but it will carry more than astronauts. Artemis II will carry the hopes of millions of people around the world. It will carry the aspirations of the NASA family who glance up at the moon every night, knowing their efforts will return us to the moon. And it will carry the dreams of students who burn the midnight oil in libraries and laboratories, preparing one day to support an Artemis mission. And it'll carry the inspiration of the children who imagine themselves soaring in the skies. We will show what is possible when we dare to reach distant cosmic shores. The crew was selected by the Director of Flight Operations, Norm Knight, and the Chief Astronaut, Joe Acaba, and under the supervision of the Johnson Space Center Director, Vanessa Weiss. Will you all please join us up here? And I want to acknowledge again our Canadian partners, Minister Champagne, Francois Philippe. Will you please come up, please? The Artemis II crew represents thousands of people working tirelessly to bring us to the stars. This is their crew. This is our crew. This is humanity's crew. May I introduce them to you all? She's an engineer who got her start at Goddard and is no stranger to breaking records, logging the longest continuous space flight ever by a woman, your mission specialist, Christina Hammett-Koch. He's a Master of Science in Physics, an F-18 pilot, and a Canadian astronaut. Your mission specialist, Jeremy Hansen. He's a naval aviator and test pilot that's flown over 40 different aircraft, most recently the first operational commercial crew mission. Your Artemis II pilot, Victor Glover. He's a decorated naval aviator, test pilot, and leader of the highest character. Your Artemis II commander, Reed Wiseman. Ladies and gentlemen, your Artemis II crew.
All right, thank you, Administrator Nelson. And the hard part's over now, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Well, Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy, I am so proud to have you four standing here in this moment. You are the right crew for this mission. You are the future of Artemis, and it looks bright with you at the controls. As head of flight operations, I have the privilege of getting to know each and every astronaut. The best part of my job is that I'm surrounded by people who inspire, who give hope to those that might follow in their footsteps. Christina, with a work ethic and willingness to lend a hand that only someone who spent their summers working on a farm growing up can have, your relentless drive is unmatched. You have already made your mark in the remote corners of our planet. You have already been in the history books as a record-setting astronaut. You're a trailblazer and a role model for every generation to come. You've already been advocating and uplifting children in your community, and I know that you are just getting started. And as the only professional engineer in the crew, I know who Mission Control will be calling on when it's time to fix something on board. So we appreciate you. Victor, you wanted to be 100 different things when you grew up, but I can say I'm truly thankful you ended up as a Navy pilot and an astronaut. Like so many, seeing other astronauts take flight planted the seed. And when you heard Pam Melroy speak at a test pilot conference, that was the moment you decided to apply. So Pam, thank you for inspiring others. Victor, you were the first person in your family to graduate from college. And you always talk about how much of the love and support of those around you made your dreams possible. I can honestly say I've never met anyone as determined as you are to spread that same love and support until everyone who passes into your orbit is better for it. You overcame every obstacle that came your way. Every obstacle, and then you dedicated your life to crushing those obstacles so that future generations can dream in a space unbounded. So thanks, Victor. And finally, Reed, an explorer from the beginning. The forest of your youth might be smaller than the frontier that you're heading for now, but this was always you. It's what you were meant to be. You said for a time you wanted to be a train engineer, but I don't think trains go quite as fast as you need them to, so I wish the Reed of your youth, the ones that, that you're dealing with bullies, dealing with the uncertainties of growing up, could meet you now. Meet the Reed who took his first jet for a spin and knew he was meant to soar across the skies. The Reed who found a home and family in the Navy and here at NASA. The Reed who led our astronauts into a new era of space exploration. And the Reed who will lead Artemis II from the Earth to the Moon and safely back home again. All of you will lead us into this brave new frontier. You are the Artemis generation. We are the Artemis generation. And with that, I will hand it back over to our neighbors to the north to talk about Jeremy, who will take his own place in history.
Well, Jeremy, I'm not going to talk about your early life or your lovely family. I'm not going to talk about your military service and everything you did as a fighter pilot, an F-18 fighter pilot. I'm not even going to talk about what you did as an astronaut and being the first Canadian to go on a lunar mission. I'm going to talk about your humanity and share with the world a story when I was with you at the Kennedy Space Center and I saw the power of the blue suit where we had hundreds of people storming to Jeremy. But Jeremy did one thing. He talked to each and every one. You took the time to talk to all the school children who were there, the Artemis generation, and they are here today and watching us. You took the time to inspire them. You took the time to thank all the teachers who are there to support our kids and teach them STEM skills that will bring them in exploration and being the future astronauts. You took the time to talk to each and every family that were coming from around the world and across North America. What I want to celebrate to you is your humanity. The fact that you have been inspiring not only us today, but keep inspiring humanity. To you, Jeremy, go Canada. Thank you, everyone.
So here we have it. Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy. Each of these adventurers has their own story, but together they represent our creed, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. This is the power of space. This is the power of our space program. It unites people. It brings them together. It brings parties together to explore, to discover, to dream. Together we will usher in a new era of exploration for a new generation of star sailors and dreamers, the Artemis generation. Together we are going to the moon, to Mars, and beyond.
All right, let's give a big hand to our leadership. All right, you've heard from us, so now it's time to hear from your crew. I'm going to clear the stage, and I'm going to turn things over to our Artemis II commander, Reed Wiseman.
All right, so I got to ask the school kids, is it hot in here today? Woo! All right, and I don't think that in my 14 years at NASA, we've had this many astronauts in one place at one time. I'm losing my voice. We're having so much fun backstage. It is great to see this diverse international group. Awesome to be here with you guys. Woo! I'm going to hand it over to the gentleman to my right here, Victor Glover, who has become, in the last few years, an amazing mentor to me. I didn't ask for it. He didn't ask for it. It just happened that way. One of the best leaders I know, one of the best dads, husbands, and friends, and one of the most talented aviators I've ever met, Victor Glover.
Thanks, Reed. I appreciate that. Wow, what a day. Look at all of this. This is amazing, isn't it? I mean, after all of that, I feel like Denzel Washington should be up here talking to you. But you just got us. I want to thank God for this amazing opportunity. And I think I speak for all of us. I want to thank our families for the amazing support. It is your love and support that has made this journey possible. Please give them a round of applause. And to all of the folks who made this celebration possible, thank you for your hard work. They're the real ones in here sweating with all of us. But this is a big day. We have a lot to celebrate. And it's so much more than the 4 names that have been announced. We need to celebrate this moment in human history. Because Artemis II is more than a mission to the moon and back. It's more than a mission that has to happen before we send people to the surface of the moon. It is the next step on the journey that gets humanity to Mars. Yeah, you can clap for that. That's big. And this crew will never forget that. Now, we have a lot of work to do before we get there, and we understand that. And when talking about that work, you may often hear people say, human spaceflight is a marathon, not a sprint. But we have watched the people that work so hard to make our mission possible, and I can tell you, it is a series of sprints. That's called a relay race. Human spaceflight is like a relay race, and that baton has been passed generation to generation, and from crew member to crew member. From the Gemini, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Soyuz, Skylab, Mir, the Shuttle, International Space Station, commercial crew, and now the Artemis missions. And we understand our role in that. And when we have the privilege of having that baton, we're going to do our best to run a good race to make you proud. Perfect. I pray that God will bless this mission, but I also pray that we can continue to serve as a source of inspiration for cooperation and peace, not just between nations, but in our own nation. Thank you, and God bless us all.
Thanks, Victor. Awesome words. What I wanted to highlight for all of you today is, big picture, when I step back, there are 2 reasons why a Canadian is going to the moon. That makes me smile when I say that. The first one is American leadership. It is not lost on any of us that the United States could choose to go back to the moon by themselves. But America has made a very deliberate choice over decades to curate a global team. And that, in my definition, is true leadership. A body, an entity that seeks out others who can contribute, allows them to rise up, lifts them up to make their contributions to bring their genius. That is American leadership. And as a Canadian, I am very proud to reflect that back to you, and I am grateful. All of Canada is grateful for that global mindset and that leadership. So thank you. The second reason is Canada's can-do attitude. For decades now, literally thousands upon thousands of Canadians have risen to that challenge to bring real value to the international partnership with respect to space exploration, to bring real solutions. Our scientists, our engineers, the Canadian Space Agency, the Canadian Armed Forces, across government, all of our leadership working together under a vision to take step by step, and all of those have added up to this moment where a Canadian is going to the moon with our international partnership, and it is glorious. So at the end of it all, I am left in awe of being reminded what strong leadership, setting big goals with a passion to collaborate and a can-do attitude can achieve. And we are going to the moon together. Let's go. Let's go.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Reed. It is an honor to be here. I also want to thank our families, the Trailblazers, our colleagues, and our leadership. My fellow astronauts know that one of the questions we get all the time is, are you excited? And I can tell you, when I think about this mission that's a relay race with international partners, it's also so awesome in and of itself. We are going to launch from Kennedy Space Center through the work of the Exploration Ground Systems team. we're going to hear the words, "Go for launch," on top of the most powerful rocket NASA's ever made, the Space Launch System. And we're going to ride that rocket for 8 minutes into Earth orbit. We're not going to go to the moon right away. We're going to stay in an amazing high orbit, reaching a peak of tens of thousands of miles while we test out all the systems on Orion and even see how it maneuvers in space. And then, if everything looks good, we're heading to the moon.
Yeah.
It will be a 4-day journey, going 250,000 miles, continuing to test out every bit of Orion, going around the far side of the moon, heading home, going through the Earth's atmosphere at over 25,000 miles per hour, and splashing down in the Pacific. So, am I excited? Absolutely. But my real question is, are you excited? I see you. And I ask that because the one thing I'm most excited about is that we are going to carry your excitement, your aspirations, your dreams with us on this mission, Artemis II. Your mission.
I think I'm in pretty good hands. Victor, Jeremy, Christina, thank you guys for those words. Absolutely awesome. We're just going to close. The crew would not close without just saying thank you. That is thank you to the NASA workforce. Thank you to our industry partners. Thank you to the Canadian Space Agency, everyone in Europe that's working for this. We got people in Airbus working our European service module. This is a global effort, Artemis II, and it's only going to get larger with Artemis III and beyond as we get private spaceflight involved. SpaceX is building our lander for Artemis III. So to the NASA workforce, to our program managers, our center directors that are here, the amazing political support that we feel right now to bring our country together, to bring our entire world together to go explore, to get to Mars and beyond. We say a huge thank you. To the astronauts that are over here, a huge thank you. You are our friends, you are our families, you're our colleagues, and I do want to highlight right now there are 7 folks on the International Space Station. Where's Joel? On Joel's International Space Station, orbiting our planet right now. 3 cosmonauts, 3 Americans, and an Emirati from the United Arab Emirates. If any of you over there are looking for heroes today, go Google these folks because they're our heroes. And I definitely want to call out our friend Frank Rubio, who has already spent 6 months up there. And Frank is going to spend another 6 months due to an issue with his spacecraft. So he'll be up in space for over an entire year. All right, that man is a hero, for sure. Yep. And then Frank Rubio leads me to Deb Rubio, his wife, and his 4 kids. That family, those are heroes. They are putting it out there, and they are getting the job done, and it is amazing. And she still gives us eggs fresh from her chickens at her farm whenever we go over there. I mean, it's totally awesome. The Rubio family is an amazing family. And that brings the 4 of us to our families who are in the audience with us. This is going to be a relay race unlike any you've ever run, and we are so happy to have you with us. Thank you.
Got more you want to say, Reed?
There's 3 words that we keep saying in this Artemis program. We are going, and I want everybody to say it on 3. 1, 2, 3. We are going. We are going.
That was awesome. I got to say, you guys choked me up a little bit, so I appreciate that. I want to thank you all for sharing in this moment today. Thank you to all of our speakers and esteemed guests, and thanks to our crew, Reed, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy, as they get ready to embark on this journey. I'll ask all of my fellow astronauts to join us back up here. Come on up, everyone.
All right, this is Brad Panovich back. You just saw the announcement of the crew for Artemis II. Pretty spectacular there. You could tell it was pretty hot in that hangar. You saw people in the audience fanning themselves, and you also heard some comments from some of the astronauts. So what you're looking at right now is the 4 crew members who were selected. The commander, Reed Wiseman, Christina Cook, who is originally from Grand Rapids, but grew up in Jacksonville, North Carolina. She is a 3-time graduate of NC State with 2 undergraduate degrees, a master's degree, and she got her PhD there as well in 2020 as honorary PhD. And then you have Victor Glover there as well, and Jeremy Hansen. He is from Canada. So those were the 4 selected. They're congratulating and hugging the other astronauts that were in the pool. Now remember, they're all still going to be training as if they're going, because if something happens to one of the 4 selected or for further missions, so you'll see them all training together, but those are the 4 right now that are selected to go. Now the target date, and I say this is a target date because we don't know for sure because of delays, but right now it's tentatively scheduled for late 2024, which is, I'm thinking the month they're looking at right now, from what I've seen, looks to be sometime in November, possibly late next year. So we've got a ways to go. You're going to be seeing these faces quite a bit more. Betsy and I were talking about when she was down there for Artemis I launch, that she got to meet a lot of the astronauts that you're seeing on stage right now. And they were going through extensive media training, because one thing about astronauts now in 2023, all 4 of these are on social media. They're very active on social media. I follow them all on Twitter. They're going to be bombarded with questions, interviews. People are going to be diving into their lives because we're going back to the moon after 50 years. You're going to have the first person of color as well as the first woman to set foot on the lunar surface as well. So while Artemis II is not technically going to land, these will be the 4 that will continue the mission, because they're going to do all the site surveying, being ready for Artemis III, which eventually will be the landing on the lunar surface. And then remember too, Artemis is just the beginning. There's going to be a lunar colony built, a base where refueling, rest can take place. There will be some harvesting of frozen water on the lunar surface, and then the next part of Artemis is going to be to go to Mars. So this is a huge announcement today that these 4 will be the ones going, and really the first astronauts to go beyond orbit of the Earth since 1972. So think about that. That's going to be 51 years this year that occurred. So pretty amazing. There's their pictures. They must have photoshopped this, because unless they knew they were going to be the 4 ahead of time, or maybe they selectively grouped them together. But there's the 4 astronauts going to the moon. So we have a long year to talk more about this. And of course, there will be future tests. There will be more training. And we're going to get you ready for that Artemis II launch, which is coming up next year. So again, we'll start from left to right. This is right here. I've got to make sure I get it right. This is Reed Wiseman. There's Victor Glover. There's Christina Cook. And there's Jeremy Hansen. And you can see the Canadian flag on his arm, because there was going to be 3 Americans and 1 Canadian selected for this. So pretty amazing day. You saw the dignitaries down there in Houston. And we're excited. Now we know the faces of the 4 humans that will be going back to the moon next year, barring any delays. I think the fact that Artemis I actually went successfully, even though it was delayed and everything ran correctly, I think we're going to be on time next year. I think that's going to be the key part now to watch between now and next year, as they assemble Artemis II, get it together, make sure everything's good to go. And as we launch in the fall, One thing you worry about late summer, early fall target date, like we saw with Artemis I, got to worry about hurricane season down there in Florida, so that will be always something that we'll keep a close eye on. But that'll wrap up our coverage for Artemis II crew announcement. Stay tuned. We'll have probably more coming in the next weeks and months as we get ready for mankind's next trip to the moon and beyond, as eventually will be to Mars. As you heard in the presentation, this is the Artemis generation. A large group of folks were the Apollo generation. This is going to be the Artemis generation as we get ready to go back into space, we go to the moon, and then eventually off to Mars. Thanks for joining us today, and have a great Monday.